Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rock Cut Review. My name is Kombucha Swagathon Stewart, aka Fripdazzle McDingleberry, aka Swing Swang Jingalang, aka Horse Choker, aka the Once and Future King, aka Ed. And I am so glad to be back with you here on Thursday nights. Who is already in the chat? Let's take a peek. Sugar Kitty! Isn't Twar the great metal band with the Japanese costumes? That's right. That's exactly who they are. Oh, the Roop has a Yorkshire terroir. He's a little asshole. Aw. Donner Pass is here. Good to see you, Donner Pass. Gary White, how are you, Mr. Gary White? Good to see you. La Print, I did see your email the other day. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at getting back to people by email. I have a lot of people to get back to, actually. So you are one of many. I'm sorry, I'll get back to you very quickly. What are you doing? He is warming up with an avalanche using rye and peanut butter cream. Okay. Following with the rye bottle kill in Coke with Balcones rye in the balance. Okay. All right. You do you, LaPrint. Good for you. Jason Busey. What is up, my man? It is good to see you again. So happy that we have you here. Bayou Drams. Hey, what's up, Bayou Drams? What's up? I do love New Orleans. Man, Creole food's the best. In fact, did I run into you at the Bastards Ball, or was that Scotch on the Bayou? I think there might be multiple Bayou-centric people. That might have been someone else. I'm sorry, but good to see you, Bayou. Tom Flanagan, good to see you. John Gunsel, what's up, man? Hey, David, how you doing? And Cohen, yes, you know I'm all about that social justice. And Bubble Bath, yes, that's a good choice. Bust out that Kilhoman 100% Isla. I finished mine off, unfortunately. That's the problem. I keep finishing off bottles or giving bottles away or doing shit with bottles right before it turns out I need them for something like this. It's very silly of me. Keep drinking my whiskey. Oh, it was Scotch on the Bayou. I'm sorry. My bad. Jim Morris, good to see you. And hey, Adriana, what's up, Whiskey Mountains? Everybody go show some love to Whiskey Mountains, of course, because she's great. And what the fuck is terroir? So when I started thinking I wanted to do this stream, what I was thinking was it was just going to be me sitting here because I started thinking about doing this stream a while back, and I was like, oh yeah, I got a bunch of different stuff made with different grains, different local grains from all over the world at this point because I've been just sitting on bottles. I might as well do a stream about terroir, right? And I thought it was just going to be me sitting here drinking just random bullshit, which is pretty much what I usually do anyway. But then I realized something. Well, actually, I didn't realize something. I was introduced something. I've been reading this book here, The Terror of Whiskey, or The Terrior of Whiskey, or The Terroir of Whiskey, by Rob Arnold. So I started reading this book, and I came to realize I cannot do this topic justice. I can't. At least not in one stream. There's no way. There's no way. This is going to be the briefest, well, maybe not the briefest, but a brief introduction to what I have learned about terroir, especially from this book. And I'm going to drink some whiskeys. But at some point in the future, I need to get this man, Rob Arnold, who is the distiller at TX Whiskey down in Texas, of course. I need to get this guy on the show. That is my goal. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to do this stream now. I'm going to bumble through it best I can. But part two, which we absolutely has to happen. I'm having this guy on as a guest. We're going to do this proper. We're going to do this scientifically. It is going to be awesome because this guy's a genius. I got to say, reading this book, this guy is fucking so smart. Right, he is the distiller for TX. He's also getting his PhD in, I don't know what the term is, plant stuff, ergonomics, agricultural stuff. And this book is crazy good. Now, I would recommend this to anybody who wants to take a deep dive into learning about terroir. If you want to learn about terroir and you want to figure out what the hell it has to do with whiskey, this is a great place to go. I will warn you, you're going to want to bone up on some of your chemistry beforehand. If you haven't taken chemistry in a while, this is a little hard to read. He does his best to make it simple and entertaining as possible. It does get a little dry at times because it is talking about a whole lot of chemistry. It's a lot of chemistry. It's a lot of viticultural stuff because he's talking about wine, especially because wine is light years ahead of whiskey in terms of terroir. So be forewarned, it gets heavy. There is a lot in here. But I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of it because it's fun. So I see a couple more people came on in. Bayou Drams is saying, as a tea nerd, terroir is one of the things that got them experimenting with whiskey. That's cool. Yeah, no, whatever gets you in the door, that's awesome. Who else is here? Who else did I see? Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? I think it'd be really awesome. Yeah, science, man, science. Mike Stahl, did I say hi to you already? Bubble Bath! What's up? Whiskey should make their own term for it with blackjack and hookers. I'll make my own amusement park. Blackjack, hookers. You know what? Screw the amusement park. Hey, Andrew Sparrow, what's happening, my dude? What's happening? All right, so let's define terroir real quick because I think I had a somewhat simplistic idea of what it meant. Because very much so, I thought of it mostly as the climate, the topography, the soil composition, all of that stuff, and how it affects whiskey. And that's true. That is what it is. Partially. Because a big part of it, maybe even a bigger part of it, is that it's not just about the soil and the climate and the topography. It's about the way a particular variety or species of plant interacts with that topography, with that climate, with that soil, and the human element. Also, what, in wine's case, viticultural techniques or our agronomic techniques are the humans doing when they're planting and harvesting and so on and so forth. And especially with whiskey, this can be a little hard to suss out. Exactly what the influence is because there are many, many steps to making whiskey. Hey, Donald Rance, Irish Whiskey Yoda. I'm sure you've had some of this, right, my man? Hey, Eric McDaniel, too. What's up, man? I believe you can get terroir on new make, but you can't truly get it in whiskey. Okay. because cask influence varies so dramatically that you can end up with a good single barrel or crap barrel. No two barrels are the same, so in the end, you have to rely upon a blender's capabilities. Yeah, no, that's certainly a good point. And that's something I'm actually going to talk about a little bit in a moment. He goes on to say, even if he's picking ones for that first new make profile, it's not terroir at that point. That's an interesting argument. Because that does play into some important things about where flavor comes from. Wesley, what's up? How's it going, man? So, back to why it's hard to suss out terroir in whiskey. Because whiskey, as compared to wine or even beer to a certain extent, does go through a lot more. Oh boy, we just had a brownout. I don't know if y'all can still see me. Sorry, we've been having issues all week, and with power around here in Wisconsin. So hopefully you can still see me. I don't know. Anyhow, I'm going to continue as though you can. So, whiskey goes through a lot more processing than, say, wine. Wine, obviously, depending on the type of wine you're either making a must or a juice, and then you're fermenting it. And then, obviously, there are secondary fermentations and fermentations within the bottle, etc. There's a variety of grapes. There's a tons of different grapes. They all have different interactions with the soil. On the other hand, whiskey goes through a lot more steps. You start with grain. You have to mill that grain into a grist. You have to take that grist. You have to mash it. You have to get those starches turned into sugars. Then you have to take that, you ferment that. So now you've got your beer, your wort, and you're mashing that, or you're fermenting that. And then once you have fermented that, now you can distill it. And once you distill it, then you have to age it. So there's obviously a lot more processing that goes into whiskey. So the contention, and something I think Eric McDaniel was getting at, is that you can't necessarily find terroir in whiskey because it's been overly processed. Okay? That any terroir from the grain would eventually, be extracted out over the course of this processing. Now, oh, you can still see me. Good. That's important. Aaron Hardiman says, if bread can have terroir, I think whiskey can too. I'd like to think so. Now, I've done enough talking. Let's pour some whiskey real quick. One of my lights did not come back on, so hopefully this looks okay. I don't know how it looks on your end. Well, whatever. We're going to run with it. We've had power outages for 2-3 straight days over the last couple weeks. We've had some really bad storms all in a row. So it's been a pain in the ass. Biodram says that provenance is a better word for whiskey than terroir. Interesting point, because we're also going to talk about that. You prefer me in the dark. Thanks. So now the thing that I think does, now we're talking about new make a little while ago. New make, what the experiment that Rob Arnold, where's the book? Rob Arnold did in Terroir of Whiskey was he took 3 different farms, 3 different grain varieties, or in this case, 3 different varieties of yellow dent corn. And he had them planted and grown on these 3 farms, and there was 1 extra farm, so it ended up with 10 different corn varieties. 1 from each farm, well, 1 of each variety from each farm, and then 1 extra farm with 1 variety. And then he made basically new make bourbon out of them. The idea being that they were able to find 36 compounds that were affected by the growing cycle on these farms. So these were compounds that were affected. They were either derived from the grain itself, or they were derived from a mixture of, well, I should say precursors. So when the grain was mashed or fermented, the precursors in the grain gave rise to certain compounds. About 36 compounds. Of those 36 compounds, you ended up, there were, and I'm going to mess up the numbers because I'm not that good. I'm bad at remembering. But of those 36 compounds, there were 8. There were 8 that matched up with important flavors that are shared in fully aged bourbon. So that brings up an interesting question. Was that if these flavors are present in new make bourbon, if there are 36 compounds that are in new make bourbon that are affected by terroir, these flavors also showed up in studies done on actual aged whiskeys. Now, he didn't do the studies on the aged whiskeys. The studies done on the aged whiskeys were done by a few different people on a few different types of whiskeys. One of which was bourbon, one of which was rye, one of which was actually a peated malt. All right? So, thank you. I'm glad someone's enjoying this. I'm glad folks are enjoying this because it's a lot of me just talking so far. The idea being that you have esters, aldehydes, noprenoids, I'm going to fuck this up, noprenoids, and phenols that all can affect the taste of whiskey. Not all of them are present in every whiskey. Not all of them, right, showed up in the aged whiskey as opposed to the new make. And not all of them were at levels high enough for the human nose to detect. All right, because that's part of what we're doing here. We're talking about sensamic testing, is where you're actually testing what level of a compound can the human nose detect in something, anything. So, for example, in our 2 Waterfords. Now, these 2 Waterfords, and the fun thing with Waterford, check this out, is that, hopefully I should be able to share my screen with you guys, is that you're actually able to, why are you being weird? Point being, you'll have to trust me on this. You can actually go and check out Waterford's particular what the provenance of these particular bottles. So what they're doing is they're actually doing individual farm whiskeys. So this one right here, this is Raclaw. This is edition 1.1. And we've also got Dunmore on Dunmore, the 1.1 as well. Hey, what's up? What's up, Emily Chambers? How you doing? So now, the thing that's interesting between types of whiskey is that the biggest difference that they found, or one of the biggest differences, is not that there are necessarily a lot of different compounds between different types of whiskey. What's interesting is that the biggest difference was the concentration of those compounds in the whiskeys. So, for example, certain esters, or I believe isoamyl something or other, that concentration makes a big difference in the whiskey. But there's also impact compounds. These are things that exist in one particular whiskey that have a big, huge impact in that particular thing. So now in this case, we do have Can I get this? I really want to show you guys this because it's so cool. And I wish this would, the stupid StreamYard would work. Because let's see if I can't yep, we're gonna get this for a second. All right. Now hopefully you're seeing my screen right now. Because this is the Waterford website. If you're getting a stupid infinity mirror effect, I'm sorry. Let's hope. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. So this is really cool. I dig this a lot. They're actually giving you, so for example, this is Dunmore. This is Racla. So they're actually giving you the whole breakdown of exactly what went into your bottle. The cool thing with this is both of these whiskeys are at an ABV of 50%. They're both made with, and we'll go down, Arena malt, Maori distiller's yeast, production water, volcanic aquifer, same for both. Fermentation was a little different, 141 hours for the Racla, and I believe 156 hours for the Dunmore. But in both cases, you know, they were pretty much the same. The main difference being elevation, the type of soil. So in this case, fine loamy drift, and also fine loamy drift. But then a little bit of difference. These two are actually relatively close together, but a little bit of difference. And then they actually show you a map of the farm itself. This is really, really cool. I think that's just the neatest goddamn thing. That's true. You are paying $80 for 3-year-old whiskey. You're not wrong about that. Now, the fun thing with this is more so, I think, getting to compare these two. I want to do these two first because they are relatively light. They are relatively young. I wanted to kind of do these two together first before I get into a bunch of really heavy flavors. So let's do, this is Dunmore first. Yeah? Yeah. No, wait, this is Racla, this is Dunmore. And now, other than that, really this was all pretty much the same. I mean, refill barrels, or second use barrels, all the same distillation, all just Irish malted barley. This is very fruity. I mean, you get that big burst of melaniness, aptliness. Also an interesting compound, acetaldehyde, however you say that. That is an interesting one because it does give you an interesting sour apple note on a well-aged whiskey, but it can come off as nail polishy if not properly aged. Oh, they didn't use some of the barreling in some of their expressions. Well, even still, this is probably the closest we're going to get for any of these. But yeah, grassy, a little appley, just a hint of that tropical fruit. And then we're going to come over here with our Dunmore. Yeah, acetal. Yeah, it's crazy. Actually, the difference between these two is pretty crazy. There's similar elements. There is a sour green apple, certainly on both. But yeah, no, the Racla is so much stronger. It's bigger. It's more voluptuous. It's got a lot more flavor. It's kind of shortbready. Yeah, it's got that shortbreadiness, but with a ton of that green apple. Just so much green apple. There is a little raisin on here. There's some raisin on here, which makes me wonder, did this get a little bit of ex-sherry casking? I don't actually know about that. That might be. That might be. But yes, we are talking about Terror. Halloween came early this year. Yeah, this, as opposed to the Dunmore is way more of a dusty, malty thing. This is kind of barnyardy. Yeah, this is kind of a barnyardy thing with less, I mean, there's a dark honey note, but it's not, there's way less fruit on this. So little fruit, like way less compared to the Racla. Racla is big and beautiful and so much fruit. This guy, not so much. Yeah, this is more like digestive biscuit. This guy right here, digestive biscuit, kind of a dusty, barley, malty thing. Maybe a little bit of milk chocolate. Really lacking any of that big fruit, you know? Hey, what's up, Scott? Good to see you, my dude. Yeah, there you go, Malort. Inspired terroir in the hearts of many. So, I mean, just based on these two, I do think there is a significant difference in that the grain flavor. Now, these are both pretty young, especially for Irish whiskey. 3 years old is not old for Irish whiskey. There's not a lot of barrel influence here. So I will say, even within a pretty small area, I do think you are getting a pretty distinct difference in flavor for a young whiskey that is pretty grain forward. This is pretty grain forward, and you're getting a big difference in that fruitiness, especially. And that's probably one of the things that's most important. Those esters are probably one of the most important things, in that different grains grown differently are going to have different amounts of the precursor for esters. So if I remember correctly, you take fatty acids, which are eaten by your yeast. They poop out ethanol and organic acids. The combination of those two creates esters. And that's what happens in fermentation. Now, I have heard some people say you can also get it in other ways. But considering that the esters are a big coming from fermentation, they're a big part of that fermentation, and that element is really influenced by the grain rather than the barrel. I think it's safe to say that in this case, at least, you really are getting a big difference between the two. You really are seeing that kind of terroir, at least in this case, a grain-driven difference in that fruitiness. Now, for the other flavors, who can say? I don't necessarily know if, for example, that raisin note is something that had anything to do with the grain itself. Who knows? That one, I'm not sure about. I certainly think that apple note, though, that's really shining through. Good old Wrath here. Yeah, that is considerable. Now, Bubble Bath brings up a good point. At what age does the terroir disappear? I don't know if it ever necessarily does. You know, does it become masked by the barrel, or does it just interact differently with the barrel depending on the age? You know, I think I would argue, and this is not me being a scientist, but I get the feeling that the idea of terroir the terroir and the barrel being separate is not necessarily true, at least theoretically in my mind. I think certainly, and this is something Rob Arnold in the book also defines. He defines the barrel as having provenance, but not terroir. Reason he says that is because the barrel is not farmed. The wood is not farmed. It's harvested, it's collected, it's managed, it's not farmed. There's no agronomic element to, getting wood. So wood has provenance, but not necessarily terroir. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I understand as a working definition, I think that makes sense. And to focus on agricultural products traditionally has been what they've done in wine making, because that's their whole game. Like, sure, they barrel age it a little bit, but not on the same level as whiskey. I think it seems to me that perhaps terroir in whiskey has a broader definition, should have a broader definition, in that perhaps the wood is as important. Where it is aged, for example, is maybe that's part of terroir too. Where something is aged, the climate in which it is aged, isn't that somewhat? You could say it's provenance, but for whiskey, considering that is an element of place, isn't that really kind of terroir as well? I don't know. I also don't necessarily think, we say like 60%, 70% of the flavor comes from the barrel. That's not really accurate, though. Really, what we're talking about is that 60% or 70% of the flavor comes from interaction of the distillate with the barrel. The distillate is made up of congeners that came from fermentation and from the grain itself. So one thing that I was very interested to find out, because we're going to move over to bourbon now. Well, should we do rye first? No, we're going to do bourbon first. So let's move over to bourbon right quick. One of the interesting things that I found out was that a big difference in the flavors of bourbon versus rye does come down to phenolic compounds, actually. When we think of phenols, we're thinking of in particular peat. We're almost always thinking of peat, right? You hear the word phenolic, usually you're thinking of peat. However, a big thing that makes a difference between corn and rye is that rye grain, come on you, there we go, that was a good pop. Rye grain is much higher in lignans and lignans, whereas bourbon is, or corn in this case, corn is much higher in lipids. So when you process your stuff, when you process your grain and you ferment your grain, the lignans in the rye turn into spicy phenols. And when the lipids in your corn get processed and turn into bourbon, those turn into esters. That's right, esters. And I believe aldehydes, something like that. And so therefore, that's where you're getting the individual characteristics. Now, I will say, surely the older you age a rye and the older you age a bourbon, in some ways, they do get closer. They do certainly get closer. A big part of that is that like 23 of the most important compounds between rye and bourbon are shared. But those lignans and those lipids make a big difference in the fermentation in making those two things taste different. So even an older bourbon probably isn't going to taste the same as an older rye. I don't know how old you'd have to get them tasting exactly the same. Don't call me Shirley. Nice. Yes, ligaments. Those are the ones. Cohen says Spain that is aged in Southern Spain, I assume would. In caves in 200-year-old sherry cask. Only a that. What? Oh, Galveston is aging. 200-year-old Amontillado cask. Jesus, that's crazy. Oh, and ketones. I forgot about ketones. Thank you, Sugar Katie. I don't exactly understand the difference between ketones and what is it? Are ketones the same as norepinephrinoids or whatever, however you say that? I don't know. Bayou Drams brings up a good point, but really, how many cooperagers know exactly where their oak was grown? Not that many. I mean, Middleton, they certainly have a whole thing with the Jar Gaelic. But yeah, not a lot. But, however, that's also in the past was true of grain. Because, I mean, from the 1900s, like early 1900s on, pretty much all of our grain was commoditized. So if you had yellow dent corn, it was taken from all over the country and maybe from other countries and all put in a big old grain elevator, and it was all mixed together. As long as it was the same grade, as long as it didn't have sticks and stones and bullshit in it, right? It was all mixed together. And that was because you could store grain. You could store grain easily. And so it became commoditized. Farmers started growing it just for yield, not for flavor. And now we're getting to a point where we're like, okay, I want flavorful grain in particular. So now farmers are going back and growing more flavorful grain, specifically for stuff like this. So maybe we're going to get to a point where we are seeing tree nurseries, where we are seeing more widespread specific selection of wood to interact with certain kinds of whiskey. I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll see where this goes. Right. Well, yeah, they know where their trees were harvested. They're not actually making it themselves. Yes, that is a good point. Okay. I'm not that smart. Give me those GMO trees. Yeah, there you go. Okay, but back to the whiskey. So right here, I've got J. Henry. This is the Patton Road Reserve. This was grown. All their rye, wheat, and barley, or no, rye, wheat, and corn is actually grown on site. So this is all Wisconsin grown. Over here, we got Old Forester. This is a single barrel pick. These are both very high proof. And probably not, I don't know if they're the best comparison, because this also has wheat in it, but it's close. Boutique wood. That's funny. Sugar Kitty says actually meth is damn easy compared to this stuff. So let's get into this. Obviously, Brown-Forman making whiskey on a much larger scale than J. Henry, using more commoditized yellow dent corn. Whereas these guys are using, I don't actually know if they say which heirloom it is. It's an heirloom red corn. That's what we know about it. Yeah. So, yeah. Now, I will say part of the difference here is that, now how old is this little fella? If I remember correctly, this is coming in at 7 years. And this guy's coming in at 5 years. Something like that. So not too different in terms of age. I will say, though, Old Forester, right off the bat, much, much more brown sugar, syrupy, sweet, that big kind of, just way sweet note. It's almost kind of a scorched wood note, like it's that charred wood note. it's gotten so deeply, dark. Whereas this is a lot more, this is lighter. This is much more, I mean, it's funny to say it because they're both made out of corn, but the J. Henry is actually more corny. It's more corn. It's more sweet corny. It smells like corn and peaches, which it might actually, they called this one the Peachy Pitmaster. I wonder if that's why. Probably. I will say, this one does have more of that. I guess I would say kind of a sawdusty, almost cardboardy note, which is certainly one of those flavors you do find in bourbon and whiskey more generally sometimes. Not always something people really like. Peach is a nice aldehyde to have. There we go. Thank you. I'm glad I have you in the chat, Sugar Kitty. You helped me out with this chemistry bullshit. I'm way over my head here. How long before some company puts a few barrels in orbit and we get space whiskey? How would that even work? Because there's no atmosphere. I mean, I guess you could just put it in a shuttle and then you'd have atmosphere in the shuttle. I'm just picturing a couple barrels floating in space. Somebody call Elon Musk. Somebody get Elon Musk on this shit. Now, this is actually another interesting point because, this is peachy. However, it's hard to tell with that if that particular thing is coming from, like Sugar Tea was saying, peach is an aldehyde. Is it coming from an aldehyde? Or in this case, there's also two things called cis and trans whiskey lactones. They were discovered specifically they're from whiskey barrels, basically. I mean, they show up other places, but that's kind of the context that they were found in. So cis and trans whiskey lactones create coconut flavors, but they can also create some peachy flavors. If I remember correctly, pretty sure. Peachy flavors, sweet flavors. So untangling exactly where that came from, it's a little hard to tell. But certainly I will say the J. Henry, does have a much more barnyardy, not stale necessarily. I don't want to say stale because that sounds kind of bad, but sawdusty thing going on here. And just a light sweetness. There's actually a hint of cooked apple on this one. Yeah. And actually, I found out the compound that gives you that taste of cooked apple, sometimes they just call that smell whiskey because it's so prevalent in whiskey. Sugar Katie says, supposedly there is a bottle of Johnny Red in Elon's Tesla orbiting Earth. Someone just needs to retrieve the space junk after it falls. Cohen says, Bourbon Bites is doing a show on cheapy Foursquare comparisons. Nice. Dorley's 12 stuff is bang for the buck at 25. Nice. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, that's true. Jefferson did put stuff on a boat. Barrels are now on fire. Whiskey has been lost. I gotta say, I really loved this Old Forester single barrel. I think it's one of the best single barrel picks my old work did before I left. That said, comparing it to the J. Henry, it does have a kind of a strange, like Play-Doh-y, salty note on the end. Like it's so overly sweet, and then it has this kind of really heavy Play-Doh-y note on the end, which isn't bad necessarily, but yeah, it's a little funny comparing these two because this one feels the J. Henry does feel a little bit more natural, I should say. I guess I'm not a hippie, so I don't really like to I don't like natural shit. Like, give me artificial shit, I'm fine with it, but it does taste a little bit more like natural. All right, let's keep moving. So I'm going to save the best for last. And by the best, I mean rye, obviously. But I do have some Scotch we need to hit. We do have to hit some Scotch. The really interesting with Scotch was that a big difference with Scotch was the phenolic compounds, particularly when it comes to peated Scotch. However, an interesting difference is that well, I guess not difference, similarity, is that a lot of the compounds found in Scotch are actually really not that different from bourbon or rye. The difference really is that the concentration of them. So bourbon, lipids, esters, fatty acids, sweet shit, rye is lignins and that sort of thing. And then malt, on the other hand, doesn't really go into either of those extremes. So you end up with a lot of the same compounds, just, again, different concentrations. So you're not going to get that really heavy, spicy thing from the lignins in the rye. You're not going to get a lot of that super sweet estery stuff from the corn. But you're going to get a little bit. Now, the thing, of course, with Scotch is that I have a couple here. I got Brook Laddie. This is Isla Barley, 2011. I love this because they tell you the farms. That's always cool. Cool, Rockside, Island, Mullindry, Strathmiddle, and Cruick. Crum Cruick, the ancient god of fucking shit up. Edward Fulmer. Good to see you, buddy. Glad you could stop by. All right, and then we've got Brook Laddie. Classic Laddie. This is, I don't actually know which batch this is. I'm sure I know it says here somewhere. Oh, it's got the little tag on it. I'd have to go on their website to figure out which batch this is. But yeah, obviously, so Scottish barley here, specifically Isla barley here. And then we've got Springbank. So Mull of Kintyre. The Kintyre Peninsula down there in the southwest of Scotland. So this is their local barley. Now, this one is a little tricky. I have no idea what to compare this to, because originally I was thinking I was going to compare it to another Springbank and see if there were differences. And then I was thinking that might not work, because this particular one, which this is this year's, this thing is ridiculously, crazily sherried. This thing is just stupidly sherried. And I was like, maybe I should compare it to a very sherried whiskey. I was thinking maybe like a Mortlock, something like that. But even like that's not going to work. And it's not the same as Macallan. It's really not the same as Glendronach. I mean, if you guys have any suggestions, like if you have any suggestions about like just a really heavy, nutty, sherried thing to compare this to, I'm all ears, because I am really not sure. This stuff is, look at this shit. This stuff is like dark as coffee. This is nuts. This is fucking nuts. So for now, I'm just going to drink it. I'm just going to enjoy it. And if I can figure out with a comparison for later, I will. Yeah. No, it's good. You want the whole bottle? I mean, I kind of don't want to give away my whole bottle. You give away some of it. All right. So, Isla barley, 6 years old, classic laddie. Okay. Right off the bat, pretty similar. And that's something we do need to discuss. Coming from the same distillery, there are always going to be similarities, partially because they're going to be using the same yeast. They're going to be using the same yeast in their fermentation. Their fermentation times are going to be similar. So generally, the esters, especially that are created in that fermentation, are going to be similar between batches, or as similar as they can make them. Obviously, also, they're distilled in the same stills. That's going to make them similar as well. Barreling is going to be a little bit different. They use all kinds of different barrels on the Classic Laddie, so who knows what exactly. I could look it up. I'm not going to right now, but I could look it up. But, oh, Aberlour Abuna. That's a good call. I might have to do that. I didn't think of that one. That's a great call. But, again, hopefully we're going to see some differences between mainland barley and Islay barley. Just an ounce. Okay, Indy, get a hold of me. Send me an email or something. Or actually, we can do a quick game for it at the end. That's what we can do. Yeah, these are very honeyed. They're very honey sweet. Certainly heavy on the earthiness, a little bit more earthiness, more barnyard than, say, the Irish, especially on this Islay barley. And I will say, Bruichladdich, even in its unpeated stuff, always has kind of a phenolic element. Now, certainly you can get smoky phenols from fermentation. In this case, though, I'm more likely to assume that they probably used some refill casks that might have had something peaty in it. I would guess, but it's possible it came from fermentation. Oh, Bayou, you might not be able to put that up in the chat because you're not a moderator, but you can always go to Facebook, throw it up on my Facebook page so I can check it out there. And if I see it in time, I'll throw it up in the chat myself, or one of my moderators will. No, I'm not getting my employee discount at Raise. I am not. Oh, yeah, and different batch to batch, different farms, different blends year to year. Yeah, absolutely. Same with the Port Charlotte version. But yeah, this is the Classic Laddie on the nose. A little bit more demure, a little bit more of a red licorice kind of thing. A little less honey. Yeah, definitely a little less honey. And the Islay Barley 2011 definitely has more of like a fir tree kind of thing. Ooh, Edredar Caledonia. That's a good call. Yeah. So yeah, there definitely is more of a greenery thing right here. Yeah, like a hint of menthol or a hint of pine. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you, Donald. You're awesome. Love you. You're the best. Yeah, and the Bruichladdich Classic, little bit more of a muddy, earthy kind of thing. Little less sweet. It's I don't know. It's a different kind of sweetness. I shouldn't say it's a little less sweet because I think it has sweetness, but it's like I say, more in that licorice direction rather than in the bright honey Islay barley style. And I think there might have been a little sherry influence on that too. Little raisiny there. All right, speaking of raisins, this motherfucker. I'm just going to drink this one. I got nothing to compare it to. Now, I will say this is one situation Where I was just saying, for example, that a lot of why I believe in terroir, not only because different oaks, I mean, obviously different species of oaks have different flavors. Quercus robur is much more spicy than Quercus alba. Quercus garryana is much more plummy and deep dark fruit than Quercus alba. And Quercus mongolica is a whole different ball game, because that's, I mean, Japanese Mizunara is a whole different fucking thing. However, when it comes to this bad boy, yes, it may be local barley, and obviously it's aged in oak, but the previous occupant in this motherfucker, I think made a big difference. Oh, thank you, Sugar. Oh man, I keep forgetting about these things. All right, terpenes are different from ketones, and I really got to brush up on my chemistry. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna study my chemistry so I can do this proper next time. Oh, stewed pears. That's an interesting call. I like that. All right. If anyone is quick to see, it's Ed. Ah, you're cute. Yeah, this is a whole different ballgame. I think in this case, when we're talking about terroir, and even talking about the terroir or provenance of wood, the previous occupant of this guy really, really took over. And I'm sure to a certain extent, the distillate interacting with that sherry cask does change the flavor. However, this is so sherried. This is so very sherried that it's almost like, you know, like I know there's whiskey in there and I can smell the whiskey, but goddamn, it's really, really under a blanket of that sherry. And I don't know how that really works. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. You know, messing around with that changes the entire calculation of terroir. Yeah. I mean, that is nutty. That is nutty. That is sweet. There is still some of that funky Campbelltown kind of stuff in there. It may have been Spanish oak cask. Good call. Thank you. Like there's still that Springbank funkiness, that Campbelltown weird. I don't know. I guess I compare it to like a vinyl balloon that was filled with I guess melon bits. Does that make sense? But it's just so very, very nutty, so sulfury. Not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. Not a bad sulfur note, but it is there. All right. We're coming to the end of our time here. It's time for me to get the fuck off of YouTube. I gotta go play some fighting games. I actually, that's a good point by you. Then you've got the sherry's original terroir to consider. And then the terroir of the Springbank versus the terroir of the original grain from the Springbank mixed with the terroir or provenance of the barrel and the aging where it was aged mixed with the sherry. Like, it's crazy. The rockupreview@gmail. Yeah. I guess, all right, there's only 25 people in the chat. I'm going to say it right now. The rockupreview@gmail. First, I don't know, let's say 6 people. I'm gonna pick a random number. 6 people to email me at the rockupreview@gmail. Get a little sample of this. I'm doing it. First 6. Everybody go email me. I'll send you some whiskey. I got a bunch of samples to ship out anyway, so I don't give a fuck. What's another couple? packages. All right. So last one, we're going to do rye. I saved the best for last. John Gunslaw, you always win. You never stop winning. I know. I got to get your shit shipped out. I've been bad. Oh, Emily, do you not have an email? Okay, the first 6 people and Emily get a sample of the Springbank. All right, let's talk about this real quick. So I don't have a lot of time. I know everyone wants to go watch Cliff. You got to go watch Cliff, okay? So don't worry about me. Go watch Cliff. But before we sign off, I do want to talk a little bit about rye. Rye is an interesting one. The fun thing that I was reading in the book by Mr. Arnold was that they did a comparison of someone did a comparison, Wild Turkey and Rittenhouse, both 51% rye mash bills. And, all right, they displayed extremely different amounts of volatile phenols, which is what gives rye its spiciness. Nice. I'll respond to whoever wins. I know this was not a very good competition. I just got goaded into giving away whiskey. So whoever wins, wins. That's just how it is. So a big part of how those lignins break down into volatile phenols, obviously, is how it's processed. So obviously, terroir includes agronomic elements. Something it does not necessarily include is the distillery processing. So, I mean, that's not an agronomic element. That's a industrial processing element, for lack of a better term. So, depending on the fermentation and the mashing of your rye, you can get very different amounts of phenolic compounds, or in this case, volatile phenolic compounds. So, not only is it about the mash bill, it's also about how it's processed, it's about how it's grown, it's about all that shit. So, let's take a peek at, this is 6 and 20 Distillery Heirloom Rye. I think I got this from Ben Eves. I hope that was Ben Eves, otherwise someone else I just insulted. I'm sorry about that. No, you get one. You've been hanging out with this channel so long, and I still have a sample to send you anyway. I still have a fucking Midwinter's sample to send you, so you get some. All right, let's just dive into these real quick. So heirloom rye versus Canadian rye. 100% Canadian rye. Obviously, the Canadians, when they do rye, they distill all 100% rye. They age it in a more flavorful barrel than they do their corn whiskey, because then they blend them later. Brandon Knight says Lot 4 is the only rye that he's had that's dilly. Interesting. I mean, it certainly is dilly. No, it definitely is dilly. You're not wrong about that. That is dilly as a motherfucker, which is part of why I like it. But it's also very spicy. It's got the clove. It's got the black pepper. And that comes from, if I remember correctly, it's like 4-ethyl guaiacol, something like that. I don't remember. I'm bad at this. I'm going to bone up on my chemistry before we do this again. Yeah, so that's dilly. It's got a little black licorice, but it's got a lot of clove, a lot of black pepper. Oh, green cardamom. That's an interesting call. I get dill. I certainly get dill. Now this 6 and 20, the heirloom, this is different. This has more of that. Actually, it's got kind of a rubber tire thing. Yeah, kind of a weird, interesting rubber tire thing. This is actually phenolic, but in the opposite direction. This is less of a spicy phenol, and this is much more of a actual like rubbery, plasticky phenol. Now, I don't know if Dad's Hat is quite super dilly to me. I mean, I guess it is. I don't know. I don't know if maybe I'm a little bit like I'm less responsive to dill at this point just because I drink so much dilly stuff. I guess. Yeah. Yeah. That's a fruitier rye. That's a fruitier, more red apple rye. But it's also more caramely. And it also has that much more, like actual, like what you traditionally think of phenolic as. Oh, Bayou, you're a, I don't actually know your gender, a man or a woman or something after my own heart. Jim Morris says it definitely has a good dill note on it. Ah, man, I'm gonna have to break up my Dad's Hat. I guess it does, but it's not as dilly as. God damn it, y'all gonna make me drink more whiskey. Shit. What are y'all doing to me? Fucking A. All right, little Dad's Hat. Man, see, on the nose for me, though, compared to Lot 40 especially, like that's allspice. That's a little eucalyptus-y. I mean, I guess I get dill. I don't know. Yeah, it's not as dilly as Lot 40 for me. I don't know. That's okay. Phil Rye, the whiskey guy. Sorry, man. Listen. I will get back to being a jackass soon enough. I promise you. I know content has been sparse on the channel recently. I will get back to doing some jackass shit very quickly. I promise. All right. Anyhow, this has been a stream about terroir. I did not even get into like the smallest bit of actual science when it comes to this stuff. This stuff is deep as motherfucking hell. And next time I would love to do a second stream on this. I'm going to reach out to Rob Arnold. I'm going to see if he can't come on because I would love to do that. He has done a lot of traveling. He's been to wine country to check out terroir there. He's done traveling to Ireland and Scotland. He has done a lot of stuff with this. And I would love to get him on here, ask some questions. Oh, fine, Wags. Just for you. I will say though, I gotta say, I've been lifting a lot of cases for my job. I feel like you can see my fat rolls there, but I feel like I've lost a little weight. Well, that's a different kind of jackass, honestly. Speaking of which, if you haven't heard, his distributor canceled or dropped his brand. So there you go. Sometimes shit does work out. So anyhow, until next time, thank you all for stopping by. I appreciate it. I did have one last question before we go, and you can let me know your opinion. Since I'm now working during the week, how would you guys feel if I started streaming on Sunday evenings instead? What do you guys think about that? I'm thinking maybe instead of Thursdays, I move over to Sundays. just because it used to be I always had Thursdays off. Now I actually have to work Thursday and Friday. I got to be up early. So I was thinking I might move it to either Saturday or Sunday. Tell me what you think. Oh yeah, and Mash and Grape dropped in too. That's true. Sunday Fun Day. I'm seeing some positive things in the comments already. Yeah, maybe move it to Sunday. Okay, as long as there's not wrestling on, I'm thinking maybe we move it to early evening on Sundays. Just because that'll work a little bit better for my schedule, and certainly I know things are a little busy on YouTube right now. So there you go. Can drink more on. Oh, all right. I'm getting a lot of positive information. All right. Maybe this Sunday will be our first Sunday stream. That'll be cool. All right. Go watch Cliff. Go watch Bourbon Bites right the fuck now. Everybody get the fuck off of my channel. I don't even know why you're here in the first place. Go watch Bourbon Bites. Until next time, I love all of you. You're beautiful, wonderful people. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay rotten.